Hello, and welcome to When Grooves Get Engaged, the podcast about a guy's perspective to wedding planning from two guys that just survived their own. I'm Steve.
And I'm Chris. And each week we will talk about how we navigated a different part of the wedding planning journey, what we learned in the process, and what we wish we had done differently. So, Steve, will you sit next to me?
Chris, I'm glad you're telling me where to sit, because if you didn't, we're going to be playing freaking Russian roulette here. We're going to be pushing people out of our seats, hot potato, take your pick. But Chris, we are talking about the seating chart. And I've seen in a lot of the Reddits out there for like wedding planning, people will ask, do I need to make a seating chart?
Yeah.
Can I just trust people to sit where they want to sit? Chris, what do you think? Should you make a seating chart?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it. There's too much politics. There's too much drama if you don't. So make sure you do it. I know it can be stressful. It's a pain, but you don't want fights breaking out. You don't want, you just want everything to go smoothly. You want a no drama wedding, right? So creating that seating chart, doing the work up front is going to just save you a lot of headache on the day of.
Yeah, exactly. You do not want to have guests figure this out on their own, because you will have tables that have a random seat open in the middle. You will have people sitting by someone they don't know whatsoever. You will have divorced parents magically find their way at the same table and blow up. Take your pick. You do not want any of that. And honestly, yes, people are adults. Theoretically, we can trust them to take care of themselves. But when it comes to these big events, do not make that assumption.
It may work for Southwest, but it's not going to work for your wedding. So get a seating chart.
Get a seating chart. Chris, let's go back in time. And before you start planning your seating chart, where you're going to put people, there's maybe a couple of things you got to square away. So the first thing I think is you need to realize is, where are you sitting? Are you having a sweetheart table? Are you having a head table? Is the head table going to be bridesmaids, groomsmen? Is it going to be family? What is it going to be? So you need to answer the question of where you are sitting as the most important people.
Yeah, so let's define those things. So head table is going to be the bride and groom, and typically the bridal party will be all sitting together at a table. A sweetheart table would be just the groom and the bride together, just alone, offset by themselves. So those are your two kind of major choices to start this planning process. You need to decide between those two things.
Yeah, and if you do decide on a head table, no, these could be as big or as little as you want them to be. I've seen head tables that are like 40 people, which is a bit obnoxious. I've seen some that are 20. It's just something of how many groomsmen do you have? How many bridesmaids do you have? Do you want the parents sitting at the head table or not? Because Chris, we were at a wedding a couple months ago where the parents sat at the head table.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen, but it all comes down to what you want to do.
Yeah, and the space too. And typically like the head table, like everyone, like it's usually offset towards one of the walls because everyone should be faced, like the bride and groom will want to be facing out to the party, but so is everybody at the head table are going to be facing one direction. So you don't have both sides of the table to deal with. If you have a super large bridal party, you may have to figure something out with the space and if they have rectangular tables and do some logistics that way. So just kind of keep that.
Yeah, I've seen head tables where it was like two head tables. You have a lower head table and then you have higher head table.
Yes.
So like the bride and groom look over the other head table, which looks over everyone else. So there's ways to do it. But after you kind of figure that out, Chris, you need to understand, what kind of tables do you have? Are they rectangular? Are they circle? Are they square? What are you dealing with? Realistically, how many people can you comfortably fit at a table? And how is that going to look?
Yeah, I'll say the vast majority of venues, a lot of them have different options, but your typical average venue, caterer, or wedding place are going to have 60-inch rounds, which are going to fit about 8 people comfortably, 10 just fine. And then typically they really won't allow you to go above that, but you might be able to sneak 1 or 2 more people into that table. But really you kind of want to keep it to 8 to 10 with those rounds.
And actually going back to why you do want a seating chart, don't be surprised if you set up all these tables and a table that shouldn't have 15 people has 50 people scrunched in there because everyone wants to sit by everyone and they can do whatever the hell they want. Don't do that. Besides that, Chris, you actually mentioned how many people you can comfortably fit per table. That's another question you got to ask yourself. How many people do you want at your table? Do you want 8? With that 8 people, everyone is pretty comfortable. There's enough room to sprawl out. You're going to need extra tables. And just one thing to understand is each extra table requires, an extra headpiece, which could be flowers, could be candles, could be whatever. It's an extra cost. Mm-hmm. It requires an extra, table setting. Maybe you got to get more chairs. more linens, more napkins. So there's potential hidden cost of adding more tables. You may not think about it, but it's going to be there in the back end.
Yeah, that's a good point, Steve. What are some of the other considerations or dynamics people should be concerned with or thinking about?
Yeah, the big dynamics are always family and friends. So first you need to ask yourself, are you mingling families? And by this I mean, are you going to have the mother and the mother-in-law be at the same table, or are you going to have them separated? What usually people do is the bride side sit on one side of the hall and the groom side sits on the other side of the hall. But some people do mingle the families together. But this kind of comes down to how big is your whole event? How many people do you have? Like if you have 200 people, this might make sense. If you have 50 people, maybe you're fine just kind of mingling everyone together. So you got to kind of figure out where you fall on that.
Yeah. And just speaking from my wedding, we did not mingle families. So we kept all the family kind of together. But then obviously the next kind of decision point is where in the seating chart are you going to put these people, right? Like where are you going to put the families and how close are they going to be to either your head table or sweetheart table? So typically you're going to want the families in the closer tables to to the main table, to your table, and then spreading out from there is usually then extended family and then kind of friends.
Yeah, this is where you're going to want to bring in your family, your parents specifically, and ask them, what familial considerations do you have to make? And Chris, you mentioned a good one. How close do relatives need to sit? Obviously, if you have an aunt or uncle, you're going to want them relatively close to the head table. It's a sign of respect. Third cousin, do they need to be as close? Maybe, maybe not. At what point are you putting friends over your family? That's another thing you need to ask. And more importantly, Chris, you got to talk to your family about who can't sit by each other. We mentioned
that's the most
divorced
important
couples, maybe they don't get along, or estranged siblings, your aunt and uncle maybe don't talk for whatever reason. This is where you need to understand your family dynamics and understand how you can mitigate any potential fallout from said dynamics. So just don't put them by each other. But if you don't have that issue, great, lucky you. Talk to your parents either way.
Yeah, that's going to be great insight. And obviously, you want to minimize conflict as much as possible. So you're going to know who can't sit by who, but there might be drama that you never learned about, right? There might be stories that have been buried. So
yeah.
Always important to talk to the elders of the family because they have all the knowledge to avoid those pitfalls, and they'll let you know definitely when you're putting this together.
Chris, you actually mentioned elders, and this is something I didn't think about. We talked a little bit before this, accessibility for guests. This is something we didn't have to deal with, but I think you guys had for a couple people. What kind of considerations do you make for that?
So we didn't have so much. We just made sure that they were in one of the tables that were obviously still close to us because it was family. So they were still seated kind of closer into us, but we made sure that they had easy accessibility in and out. And it was more so our accessibility needs were more so for the party afterwards, right? So the actual celebration, like with dancing and everything, we wanted to make sure that we did have chairs surrounding the dance floor and more seating in that regard to ensure that the elders were able to see the dance floor, interact on the dance floor, and just be a part of the whole celebration while they might not be able to move like they once did.
Yeah, and then one other thing on the other end of elders, you have the very young. So if you're having kids and babies, depending on the age, you might have to make room for strollers, which strollers are massive. They take up a lot of space, a person and a half at a table, potentially two people. So you don't want to have a normal table that's maxed out and assume a stroller counts as the same space as one person. That table is going to need a little bit extra space to move that stroller somewhere and not get in the way of, servers serving the table, people moving around, mingling. So definitely think about accessibility on both ends and old.
Yeah. And so like you might be able to do like a kid's table, obviously with some supervision, depending on how old they are. Like for our wedding, we did not allow kids. It was only immediate family were allowed to bring kids. But you also might want to seat them closer to an exit or closer to a bathroom so that if they start crying or something happens or there's a mess, they have either they can exit out during speeches or go to the bathroom for a quick cleanup. So just something to keep in mind as you're planning this.
Yeah. And then one other thing to keep in mind, Chris, are you planning on playing matchmaker at all by chance? If you have a couple single friends, maybe that have never met each other, that you think would be perfect for each other, you can consider also putting them at a table.
The singles table?
The singles table, or honestly, I've heard people kind of do a table where no one is single except for the two people that they want to set up. So obviously they have to talk to each other. Another thing that you can also do is kind of pool people's shared interests together. Let's say you have a table that, is athletic. They like to talk about sports. Maybe put them at a table. You have a table that can't stand talking about sports. Well, you don't mingle them because then they're going to be bored during the actual dinner portion because they have nothing to talk about. So this is also where you kind of have to know your guests and your friends and kind of put like people with like.
Yeah. And some different considerations too. So I know we talked about either you could be more carefree and just say like seat yourself, which we don't recommend.
Don't do that.
But if you do assigned seating, you can do it one of two ways. You can assign the specific seat that they're going to be in, so everyone's in an exact place, or you can just assign them to a table and kind of self-select around that table to give a little bit of freedom of where they are. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yes, I will say that there are additional considerations when you do decide which one you want to do. Obvious one is, are there food choices? Let's say maybe you have 5 vegetarian entrees in a party of 135. You need to know exactly where those people sit so they can be properly served. Another thing is, Chris, you actually mentioned this earlier about your back to people, where, like the head table has always facing the guest. If you're doing round tables, another sign of respect is which way is the guest facing? Are they facing the head table or is their back to the head table? So if you have a lot of family has a lot of expectations and you have certain family members that you always want to be facing the head table so they feel respected, you're going to want to have a place for everyone. Otherwise, you will hear that aunt, you will hear that grandma, you will hear that whoever complain that they had a bad spot, they felt disrespected, whatever the case may be. And these are things that your parents should be able to tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just going along with that, assigned seating or assigned table is usually how most people do it. It's not an exact seat, but if you don't do an exact seat, you're going to have escort cards or a seating chart, and you might be taking that your little placard of your food. That guest food choice might be a little sticker on there. So we had stickers for all of our place cards where it was either chicken, beef, or vegetarian. And so there were stickers on everyone's little place card so that when the servers came by, they know who was getting each meal. But you'll just have to negotiate that and talk to the caterer to see how that is best done within the venue.
And if you are giving people food options, it's very important that you don't mess it up because you might also have allergies be an issue. And that's just something to be aware of.
Which goes back to the RSVPs, previous episodes and stuff. So just making sure that you're collecting that information ahead of time so that this part of the procedure and this part of the logistical planning process is a little bit easier because you have all of that all ready to go. And obviously it goes without saying, you're not really going to want to start on the seating chart until you have those RSVPs, right? You want to have a more cemented guest list before you start doing all this, because if you invite 200 people and you start placing everybody, you get everyone placed and then 50 people can't show up, then there's going to be holes all over the place that you're going to have to fill and just start over. So just wait until you have that more solidified list. There's probably always going to be one last minute ask or a dropout, but it should be minimized at that point.
Chris, that's a very good point. Wait until you get your RSVPs. After you have your actual count, food options, Chris, you can then kind of start putting together and moving people in and out of tables, seeing what makes sense, seeing what looks good, seeing what fits. I know we did this on Excel. Our wedding planner gave us essentially the layout of our space, and we did long rectangle tables. We did 20 people per table, just because that's what made the most sense for our space. So we kind of just took a person, slid them into the seat, put them into the seat, see what makes sense, what wouldn't make sense. And we had a lot of issues when it came to fitting the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th person at the table, because there were certain people that didn't know a lot of people there. So we had to kind of keep them together and keep them close to who they knew so they wouldn't feel like they had no one to talk to during actual dinner. I ended up having to split my cousins from their parents. I put their parents, my aunts and uncle, closest table to me, and then I put the cousins at the table behind, because then I put my dad's first cousins with them as well, just kind of trying to manage which family I could bring close so that no one feels left out. You're going to be doing a lot of revisions. And Chris, great call. Wait until you get your RSVPs. Otherwise, you can do it for nothing.
And as you said, too, I think it's also important to match like-minded people. So you might have obviously your friends group. There's probably certain little pockets of everyone kind of knowing each other. You might have people that straddle different friends groups. And so as you start kind of placing 1 or 2 people at a table, that's going to kind of come together. And then just speaking to how we did it, we got from the venue kind of a basic layout for our size of wedding. And they already had pre-placed where the tables would be in relation to our sweetheart table, which is what we did. And then we just started saying table 1 was this, table 2 was that. And we started placing people. And then it just kind of comes together naturally. We didn't have a lot of drama to to worry about between different family members or friends. So it kind of made the process a whole lot easier. But you might have to think about it a little bit harder as you're planning your wedding.
And then as you're doing this, you also don't have to fill every table.
Yes.
You're okay leaving a table with an empty seat or 2 empty seats. You will have some people that will just naturally move around. Let's say people that didn't know each other met at a bachelor party and they're lifelong friends now going forward. Maybe they want to sit by each other. There's an empty seat at one of the tables. Like, it's fine. You don't have to fill everything to the max. At the same time, Chris, maybe you should also have some extra empty seats because you never know.
You want balance, right? You don't want a table that's designed for 8 to 10 people sitting with maybe 4 people, right? That might just be a little awkward unless circumstances demand it. But I think you're going to want at least 6 people probably at a table if you can manage. 7's okay, obviously. And that's how our wedding went. We had definitely tables that were filled, some of that were 10, while others were closer to that 7 mark, just depending on the relationship.
And one final thought, Chris, is make sure you have a table for the staff. So this would be your DJ, your photographer, videographer, if you have one, wedding planner, if you have one, whatever staff outside of the actual venue staff that's serving the food you have, they should also be having their own table. You don't want to be like, oh shit, I forgot your guys' table, my bad.
Yeah, if you have a wedding planner or day of planner, they should kind of manage that and just kind of make sure that that table is set aside for your staff. But yeah, that is a good consideration and good points too.
Yeah, so Chris, I think that about covers it, all the considerations for the seating chart. It's I don't know about you, but I kind of felt like this was playing Tetris.
Yeah, and like in terms of tools and stuff, like some people do elaborate boards and they're like have sticky notes and everything like that. And we used Excel. We use the spreadsheet, table 1, this person, you start placing everybody. Here's your entire guest list and you just kind of mark them off. That was quite easy, quite efficient. But if you want to make a dream board and putting all these Post-it notes and little like miniature figures of everybody's face or something, because it helps you, go for it. But I just think that's too much.
It's like that Always Sunny meme where like things are going everywhere and the guy's going crazy.
It's probably something you see more in the movies. Just use Excel. It's going to be much easier. And then obviously you can plug and play. And if there's any updates, you then can just do it in the spreadsheet and then send it right off to your wedding planner. Or you're probably likely using a shared document with your wedding planner. So if you make updates, you can just highlight what the changes are so that they can pass it along to the venue.
And after you have your seating chart done, that's when you kind of need to decide how you want guests to know. A lot of people do just a giant placard with everyone written down. People find their table. Some people will have little party favors, which Chris, we're going to go over in another episode. So don't worry about that. But just know, after you're done with the seating chart, you got to find a cute, fun way to kind of let people know where they need to sit as well.
Yeah. And that's the point that you should, that's the place that you should kind of like think about all the different creative outlets that you have. Because like, if you look online, like that's one of the most creative parts of the wedding. It can be you can keep it very, very simple and just do a table, little folded up, placards. That's fine. But you can see a lot of creativity go into this piece. I've seen a wall of champagne glasses and like each champagne glass has like the person's tag on it and stuff. So like, that's kind of cool. There's different things you can do.
Be aware, just because you're done with the seating chart doesn't mean you're actually done with it. There's still a little bit more to do. But Chris, I think this is a lot of good information for the grooms out there so they can kind of get started on this and not burn out before they even get anywhere. Just kind of get all their ducks in a row first. It's going to make the process so much easier, so much smoother, and it's just going to make more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everybody for listening. Like and subscribe if you like what you hear, and it helps support the show.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Chris. I'll see you soon.
Take care.
All right. Bye.